NASM is giving you free courses. That's right, free courses each month just for being part of the NASM family. Learn about everything ranging from nutrition to strength, weight loss to stress relief, and everything in between. Click the link in the bio for information and to claim your free course before they're gone.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our Strong Mind, Strong Body podcast. I'm your host, Angie Miller, and today we are going to talk about sugar. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, you may or may not remember that song, so you might not have just gotten that little thing that I just sang to you, but we're going to talk about specifically why it's so hard to break up with sugar. I don't know about you, but I officially, one time in my life, I broke up with sugar, and I'm not even sure that it was a real breakup because, you know, there's all these hidden sugars, but I broke up with ice cream and mostly with chocolate. So I was kind of proud of myself, but it didn't last. And it just goes to show that breaking up with sugar is super hard to do. So today I have Michelle Ricker. She is an RDN and she's an amazing speaker, and she's going to talk to us about sugar. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Angie. Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this. I get questions all the time, and I don't think you're alone. It's a very difficult thing, and it's very true to your heart. So yeah, let's talk about this because it's a pretty big deal.
It is a pretty big deal. So by the end of this podcast, Michelle and I, we're going to shoot you some straight talk specifically about, is sugar really addictive? And how do we spot hidden sugars? And what is the impact of sugar on our emotional and our physical health? And is dark chocolate really healthy? I mean, that's the big question. That's what I really want to know. And then we can end the show. So my first question, Michelle, for you is, I would like to know, drum roll, please. Ba, 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 ba. Is sugar truly addictive?
Well, let's just start by saying addiction is a certain word, right? Meaning like you cannot do without, and you will hurt yourself to go find this kind of thing. So when we talk about addiction, there's a lot of research about it that says, hey, sugar is addictive. But if you look at it really, really, really close, the way the body works, we kind of want to talk about it more as like a dependence, right? Because there's a little difference. It does act like an addiction in the brain. And I think that's really where you want to go with this, is talk about how the brain responds to this.
I love that. You know what? I love that you shifted the narrative to dependence, because you're right. Addiction is a big, big loaded word. And if we're truly addicted to something, we will go to great lengths to get it. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, it takes us back down to that basic need. So I love that. Let's go with that. Is there such a thing as a sugar dependency? And I'm really hoping that you're going to talk about the impact of sugar on the brain, you know, how it impacts those neural pathways that make us crave it. And I know you can do it justice. I cannot. So here's the floor, Michelle. Do tell.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, you know, it's like I said, when you're in the middle of it and you're craving that chocolate or that ice cream, like you said, it feels like an addiction, like you can't go without. So what's really happening in the brain is it's giving you these dopamine responses, right? It's in fact impacting your neurotransmitters, your hormones, all these things that are saying, hey, give me something now to make me feel better, right? And that's the way you truly feel when you're like craving that sugar, something, whatever it is, whether it's even that coffee that has sugar in it, right? You're feeling this dependence. And that's truly what happens with our neurotransmitters, is that we're treating this almost like it is cocaine, right? There's a lot of similarities in the way that the brain responds to things. And that's what happens when sugar goes in. And we see a lot with this research, and especially we do a lot with rats because we don't want to put too many people in the position to be in this addiction space. But when we give them like this huge amount of sugar over time, they want more and more and more and more and more, right? And it kind of numbs that response. So you have a little bit, you're like, oh, that's great. Then the next day you have more and more, and you need more and more after that, is what I'm saying. So like this dependence does respond in the brain almost like an addiction in the way the brain needs it.
Okay, that was really good. That was an amazing explanation. So it impacts those dopamine receptors, and those dopamine receptors get into those neural pathways. You have a little bit, it says, hey, that was kind of amazing. Can I have a little bit more, please? Can I have a little bit more, please? And I guess it's how one glass of wine leads to four. What do you think? It is kind of that dependence on that product. And I can 100% relate to that. And we're going to talk later about, is dark chocolate really healthy? So we don't want to jump to that. But I do think that it has to do with the quality of the sugar too, because certain types of sugars don't seem to make my brain want them as much as other types of sugars, right?
Sure. If we look at it that way, I mean, if you look at what the basis of sugar is it's a carbohydrate, right? And the body looks at it as like the very basic level of carbohydrate. So a lot of things can respond that way. Like that's why we really love bread and we love bagels and we love pretzels and things like that. A lot of times that's kind of when we think of comfort foods, right? That's what happens in our brain. It gives us that nice feel-good dopamine, serotonin response, where now we're like, oh, okay, we feel good for the moment, right? And then what happens is it starts fluctuating our blood sugar. So when you talk about quality of sugar, yeah, there's different types. Like if you're talking about milk chocolate versus dark chocolate, those are different, right? Very different in qualities. Right. But we're talking about sugar, like the basis of what a carbohydrate bond is sugar, and the body looks at it that way. And one thing I wanted to say about that, Angie, is like, the way the body looks at carbohydrates is it's a primary source of energy. So we need that. And so bare basics, if you look at it like the way that our body works naturally, is we need those for energy. So a lot of times that's probably how the sugar addiction starts, is that maybe when we're stressed, when we're not feeling good, when we're low in food, our body says, you know what, I need some food. I need some energy. Make me feel better. And we go for carbohydrates because it's our primary source of energy. And that's where sometimes that cycle happens because we get it. It gives us that soothing. The brain says, hey, nice. Thank you. This is fantastic. And then it starts this blood sugar cycle, which I want to talk about a little bit more, because when you're talking about carbohydrates all being the same or sugars being the same, that's where we can really make a big difference in the way that we feel and the way that we can actually move through a sugar dependence or a sugar addiction.
I love that. Let's go there. So I'm Angie and I'm talking to Michelle Ricker. She is an RDN and we are talking about, can we break up with sugar and why is it so hard to do? And Michelle just did a great job of explaining sugar's response on the brain and talked about that dopamine kind of addiction and how it gets into the neural pathways. And now we're going to go into a deep dive on what happens with our blood sugar and why we're actually experiencing this impact. So Michelle, I'm going to turn that over to you. Tell me about that blood sugar cycle.
Yeah, sure. So as a dietitian, I like to look at kind of full body function, right? So when you talk about sugar, it's not just, yes, it tastes good and it makes us feel good. And from your standpoint, where we're looking at here is that mental comfort, that mental dependency type thing. But we really look at what the body needs big picture. It's influencing everything. And that's when I talk about blood sugar response. So we eat sugar or a carbohydrate, and what it does is it raises our blood sugar, okay? Because it gives us this little insulin boost. We now try to absorb it. We want all of it because we want all that energy. And then all of a sudden, if you don't have anything with that, which is typically what happens when you have a donut or ice cream or something, it's just sugar. Your blood sugar goes up and then it drops pretty quick. Then again, you have that craving, right? So what happens is your body's like, okay, my blood sugar is now low. I need energy again. Give me more. And I think this is where that cycle of dependency, this give me more carbohydrate, give me more sugar happens. So then you kind of get in this up and down because you give it a little more sugar. The body's like, oh, I need more because of those brain neurons. And then you get higher blood sugar and then it drops even lower. So then you want more and you're in this vicious cycle. Yes. And you feel it, right? Emotionally, this is a big issue because not only are you like dependent with your brain, your body's now dependent on getting those carbohydrates. So it's
absolutely. And sorry. And then you said, what were you going to say? Sorry about
I
that.
just said it's a twofold whammy on the body, like
Yeah.
it's a pretty difficult space.
Yeah, absolutely. And, coming from somebody who really struggles with it, I 100% understand that. And it almost dysregulates emotions. And one of the big things that I work with as a therapist, in mental health and in fitness, is those dysregulated emotions, and food plays such an integral role in that, because when we're up and then we're down and then we're up and then we're down, our emotions get dysregulated, and the way that we respond and the way that we behave and our impulsivity, all of those things that come into play when we feel dysregulated just has a really negative impact on our communication with other people and how we get along with other people, not to mention how we feel about ourselves, right?
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that we find with, especially with sugar, like you said, is that we now start getting that dependency feeling, like I said, with our neurons, with the way that our brain is responding to this dopamine, that we're not happy. We feel a quick surge when we have that sugar, so that it gives us this false boost. But then after that, it's a little bit more of like that addiction feeling where you get this kind of behavioral depression. You get a little bit of this feeling deprived. And like you said, that impacts your relationships to yourself and to others. It's now you're in this kind of like uneven space, this uneven balance with your emotions. So it's really tricky when we get into that really big cycle of it.
Yeah. And it's, there's so much complication around this. That's why binge eating is actually recognized now as a disorder, because I think it has a lot to do with this cycle. It has a lot to do with this emotional dependency. And then this, there's a lot of shame that goes into that. And so before we even talk about how do we actually break up with sugar, I think we need to talk about where some of those hidden sugars are. Because even when I broke up with sugar, my claim to fame was I got rid of ice cream and I almost got rid of chocolate, but kind of not really. Dark chocolate was allowed into my life and I always found a way to justify it, but I didn't crave it. And I guess that's my biggest thing, is I didn't crave sugar the way that I used to. Then I got rid of all the easy stuff. Like I stopped eating Snackwell's cookies or Little Debbie's. Don't judge me. It's a true story. Okay. Like I grew up eating Little Debbie's and Hostess Ho-Hos. Please do not judge. And I used to have this false perception that because I exercised, that was my big thing, because I exercised and my weight didn't change, well, I was okay. I was fighting the fight. But that has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with the damage that I potentially did to my brain, how emotionally, I felt, and the highs and lows that I experienced. And when I said goodbye to Little Debbie and Hostess Ho-Hos, and I got to that point in my life, I felt so much more in control. And I don't mean like control. I mean control in a good way. Like I didn't feel dysregulated. I didn't feel like, I just felt more empowered, that I did not need something to get through my day. I did not need sugar. I was like, sugar, I don't need you. You're like a bad date and I'm done with you. So what are the hidden sugars? Where are they?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept of what you're saying. Let me just back up 1 second before we get into the hidden sugars, because like you said, that going from all or nothing with sugar is very difficult for some people. And that's where that word addiction comes in, is that, I want to talk about where sugar is in food, but I don't want you to feel like you have to go all or nothing, because that transition of going small steps sometimes is necessary, because the brain is telling you that you need this. And sometimes we go through a true withdrawal stage when we cut out all sugar. Okay, so I think that, just be a little bit aware of that type of thing. And we can talk about that a little bit more. But like the sugar in food, like I said, if we think about it's white sugar, right? We know that that's sugar. We know that honey is sugar. Agave, all those things that have different terms to them, those are all sugar. The body looks at them and break down into the basic level of sugar. But the hidden stuff, or the things that maybe we don't think about, would be like fruit juice. Although that breaks down into a fructose, we don't get the fiber from eating the fruit itself. So the juice goes in almost as pure sugar. And that's the same as energy drinks that are out there. And I know that a lot of you think like, I'm doing the sugar-free one and that's better. But sometimes all those like new products that are out there or pre-workout drinks that are out there, a lot of them have sugar, and it's fine to have a little bit before you work out kind of thing, but it is sugar. Okay. So remember that it impacts the brain that way. Coffee drinks, all those ones where they put a little powder in there or they put some kind of tasty yumminess in your coffee, that's sugar, right? But the other ones are going to be like ketchups and barbecue sauce and salad dressings. All those kind of things have sugar in them. If you look at labels, you'll be able to see, it'll give you the carbohydrate, and then underneath that, it actually says added sugar, or it says sugars, and that's added. That means it's not natural. Kind of thing. So all those things, coconut sugars that we cook with, all those things are going to have like some hidden sugars in there to be aware of.
Yeah. So even the agave, even the honey, you're saying that in the end, it really breaks down the same way as just regular white sugar. And so we have to be careful with that.
The thing with like honey, there's some honey that have medicinal properties, like some are antimicrobial. They have a little more, minerals in them, little nutrients in them. So there's something else to it, but you're not getting any fiber. If you have it straight up by itself, the body recognizes it as sugar and going to respond the same way with your blood sugar and the brain. Yeah.
So I have a question for you about the fruit juice. So I'm assuming you're saying, or I'm just going to clarify here, you're saying like I open up a can of pineapple and the juice itself, or you saying a banana, an apple, all of that is the same?
It's not all the same. I'm saying fruit juice itself, meaning that if you're getting a can of juice or a carton of juice. But so that's kind of a really good point. And is that like when we talk about eating sugar, right? I think that a way to break the habit is to move to natural sugars, right? Because you get that sugar taste, right? When you're having fruit itself, not just we're going to take the fiber out, squish it down, and just give you the juice of it without the pulp. Okay, so when you eat fruit, you're getting the pulp with it too. And usually that helps the body slow things down a little bit with the blood sugar response. But the brain still tastes sweet, right? Because you're getting fructose. So it's different than just sucrose, which is sugar kind of thing. Right. So when you eat the food, you're getting a fiber, so it slows down that response. But again, your taste buds and your brain still say, ooh, that was sweet. I got a little bit of sugar kick there, right? Like I got a little bit of a nice little appease to get through. So that's a great way to move things into transition if you're going to go like no sugar, or you're going to try to get off of this craze that you're on.
I love that. And that's what I was hoping you would clarify, because you're absolutely right. Eating a banana can really be a really good filler for me when I'm craving something sweet, the same way with eating an apple. And I'm not a big fruit juice person, so that works just as well for me. So I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You're getting the pulp, you're getting more fibers, more fill. So it does kind of have that same impact as like you said, it's a good substitute for if I'm craving a big old chocolate chip cookie. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same. But I also want to go back to when you said, try not to go cold turkey, because you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like trying to go off of coffee. It gives you big headaches. You can have withdrawal. So for me, it was a real slow breakup, so I 100% attest to that. I think that we have to break up slowly. So let's move into, Michelle, how do we get rid of sugar cravings? And again, I'm talking to Michelle Ricker. She's an RDN, and we are talking about how to break up with sugar. So what's some of your go-to things to help us get rid of sugar cravings? We just talked about eating fruit, but what are some other things we can do?
Yeah. Again, because we talked about how addictive sugar can be in the brain, we need to break up with it slowly. This isn't something that we just get rid of overnight, and that firsthand, right? So one of the things that you need to do is really think through that, is because we're going to have to change patterns, right? And that's one thing that we kind of forget when we talk about food, is that we get emotionally attached, and our body actually is attached. So again, we talk about sugar as a dependency, or that you get addicted. So we need to make sure that the brain can handle it. So again, we need to make sure, number one, I think the biggest thing you can do is try to get your blood sugar stabilized throughout the day. So you're not in a place where your body needs that carbohydrate, and you know the dopamine response from sugar is going to give you that high and get you back up there. So if you can throughout the day, make sure you look at your protein, how much protein you're getting at each meal. It sounds so counterintuitive because I'm not talking about sugar, but we're talking about how the body responds and what it needs at certain times and when it needs that sugar. Okay, so if you're getting protein throughout the day, it slows down that blood sugar response. You don't get as high of peaks and you don't get as low of lows. So it can help you balance, and then you might not have those cravings as much. Okay, then you can use fruit, like I said, or even more vegetables. If you can get in a lot more fiber, your stomach is attached to your brain as far as telling you that you're satiated, right? You're satisfied. And if you can get the body to say, I'm satisfied, then it's like, oh, I'm not craving that dopamine. I'm not craving that big high that I get from sugar. It can now self-regulate a little bit more. So get more fruits, vegetables, try to get your blood sugar stable, a little bit of protein. Make sure you're really watching your protein throughout the day, and take it in small steps. Like this week, I'm going to cut out, like you said, ho-hos or whatever it is. Next week, I'm going to stop my, the sugar drinks, and that way the body gets a minute to kind of help respond, and you're substituting with something else so your blood sugar is staying stable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's 100%. Give yourself a week to let go of one thing. And even during that week, let go of it slowly. My husband's a big fruit juice drinker. He drinks every type of fruit juice. And so, to just say to him, cut out all fruit juices, well, cut down to 1 glass a day or whatever that might be. But yes, absolutely. I love that. I think that sustainability, we all know that with behavior modification, we do well when we slowly modify behavior. But I love that you're saying add more fiber, add more protein, because it's going to really stabilize those levels of blood sugar. And, one thing that I do want to say on that note, Michelle, is one thing that helps me anyway is some of those apps that are out there where you can put your, because I don't know about the rest of the world, but I kind of eat the same stuff every day. Like, I'm super boring. I know what I'm going to have for breakfast. I know what I'm going to have for lunch, and I know what I'm going to have for dinner unless we go out. So it's really easy. Initially, it's a lot of labor up front to load all those foods into those apps. But what they do is they give you pretty pictures, bar graphs of this is how much protein you had, this is how much sugar you had. And you're like, oh my gosh, because when you actually input the label, it's so revealing. And so if you're not super good at it, or maybe as trainers, you're like, oh, come on, Angie, this is my speed. I do this all the time. But guess what? It might not be your clients. And the minute they load it into an app, you're not just preaching the preach. You are actually giving them a visual representation of what they're doing. And you're not telling them, like I told you, it's the app that's revealing the information, and they're discovering it on their own. And that's when we all really change behavior, is when we discover it on our own, what it's actually the impact on our body and our mind. And then that's when we're able to move forward differently, right?
Oh my gosh, no kidding. Yeah, I truly believe that's a great way to start. And also, like, find substitutes that work for you. Like going cold turkey, like you said, I don't think that all fruit juice is bad and that everyone needs to cut it out. I think if you're doing it in the right amounts or whatever, and you feel like it's not an addiction, you're getting, like you're just using it for the calories and the vitamins, that type of thing, it's okay in small amounts and certain kinds. But if you do have this as an issue and you're really trying to cut back on sugar to make sure that your brain stays healthy, because one thing that we didn't mention is its impact on Alzheimer's and the way it actually breaks down the brain, and also causes inflammation in the body. There's a lot of things about sugar besides just that addictive quality that aren't fabulous for the body. Yeah. So in order to move past it and get substitutes, you have to look for those. Like, I think that, if you look at an apple with natural peanut butter, if you move from, the Skippy or the Jif or whatever that has all the sugar in it to a natural, that means it's just nuts and maybe a little bit of salt. Then you still get that kind of that feel. You feel like you're having some good peanut butter, but then you have an apple or a banana or something to give you that sweet to go with it. And that's a way better option than just having the sugary, fake peanut butter or whatever it is, so things like that are like, good substitutes that you can kind of in a way trick the mind to believe that, you're still getting a treat. Those are the things that I think, and we've done really well with like different products out there. Like I know Quest makes a peanut butter cup now that has protein and only 1 gram of sugar, and it tastes fine. It's not going to give you that same ridiculous mouthfeel that we get from chocolate and ooey gooiness, but it is going to satisfy that brain and you mentally of looking at it and eating it. Like you said, there's a lot of that mental, it's like smoking. What do we do with our hands? If we get rid of a cigarette? It's the same with food. If you're not eating something, what are you doing? You need to substitute it. So I think you're right. Like the app helps give you ideas, and then go and, find some options that work for you that give you that same satisfaction, or at least similar.
And I love that. I love the idea of, okay, so you got peanut butter with a banana or peanut butter with an apple, because at the end of the day, I think that we need to congratulate ourselves that a lot of times with food, especially with sugar, there's a lot of shame. Like I said, there's a lot of shame that goes into it because it leads to emotional eating, which can lead to binge eating and all these other things that really can cause a lot of problems for us. And so I think that if we can substitute something like a banana with peanut butter, we need to be proud of ourselves that we were able to transition and not do this shame thing like, well, I should just be able to cut it out. No, there are no shoulds here. How about if we just give ourselves the opportunity to succeed and take it slow and steady and try a banana with peanut butter, and then maybe we can transition that out of there. But I absolutely love that. And Michelle, I want to go back to one thing you said. You talked about inflammation on the brain and sugar, and I really want to throw a teaser out to all of you. Michelle's going to join me in a future podcast, and so we're going to save that one. We're going to talk about inflammation on the brain and sugar, and I want you to join in on our next podcast, because we are going to deep dive into that, because inflammation and cognitive decline, that's a huge, huge thing that I personally want to deep dive into, and I think would be really good for everybody. So before we end this segment, and again, I'm talking to Michelle Ricker, we're talking about breaking up with sugar. Before we end this segment, Michelle, I want to know, I have to know, is dark chocolate really healthy?
It is. It is. Yay. Thank goodness. Right. So yeah, I mean, and you have to look at dark chocolate as a 72% cacao and higher, right? So 72% chocolate and higher is going to give you some really good benefits. Actually, when we talk about, this inflammation, it's actually quite anti-inflammatory, giving you some good antioxidants, what's in there. And the flavonoids that are in there are actually going to help with like blood flow to the brain. So not only is it like a better substitute, it's actually good for you. So I highly recommend it on a regular basis. So either, like I said, 72% chocolate, or even go with like the cacao nibs or something in your yogurt or whatever it is in your smoothie. Those things are hugely beneficial. So go for it. If you can make that a nice substitute for you, it's fabulous to do every day.
Okay. And I honestly, for me personally, I find that when the sugar is 72% or 88% or 96%, I don't crave it as much as I do if I just put a piece of milk chocolate into my mouth. But is it then the higher the better? So if it goes up to 92%, it's even better? Or you're just saying that anything over 72% is fair game?
Actually, the higher the better, because you're looking for the real cacao. So when you have that cacao, they break it down and then they kind of powder it, they mix it a little bit. And so that's where you're getting some of that more creaminess, that nice yumminess. That's when the percentage goes down. So the higher is actually going to give you some more of the benefits, because you're getting more of the natural antioxidants and those flavonoids from the cacao itself.
Okay. So then one last question on that note. So now everybody's gotten into the dark chocolate game. And when I go up to the grocery store, I'm like, ooh, the world is my oyster on this dark chocolate. And even though I look for the higher number, is there anything I should look for in any of those bars or that may not make that dark chocolate as healthy as some of the other options?
Is such a great question. It's really hard to tell in the store when you're looking at it, but quality does matter with this, like I said, because you're looking at trying to get the true cacao out of it. But, if you just look at the ingredients and make sure there isn't a ton of added sugar to that nice dark chocolate. So there could be a 72% dark chocolate that has, toffee in it, whatever, and that toffee is all sugar. So you're kind of not getting the same benefit. You're still getting the dark chocolate, but you're getting that sugar fix as well. So I think that's where you can, looking at the label on some of those, you can actually make a difference. Otherwise, the quality is really hard to tell just from a straight label,
Yeah. When we end this podcast, I'm going to put into Google search, what's the healthiest dark chocolate? Because Google knows everything.
There are some really good brands. I wouldn't go with I'd stay with like more probably international brands kind of thing. You tend to get more stuff. Or like you said, there's a lot of people in the dark chocolate game right now that are playing nice, but I think for the big name, that do a ton more of the sugary chocolates, I wouldn't necessarily go with those and to start with, I would move to the other ones. Yeah.
Well, here's how I noticed a true story recently. A real difference is I was at Rancho La Puerta in Mexico, and I was teaching there, and they make their own dark chocolate there, and they sell it, and it is extremely expensive. And I bought some, and I came home, and they were little nibs, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't think I've really been eating dark chocolate. Yeah. This is not the same. And
so let me just say for those listeners that haven't really tried a dark chocolate, it does get more bitter the less percentage that you go, or the higher percentage of dark chocolate. So when you start at the 72%, you'll notice a difference from milk chocolate. But once you start getting higher to the 80s or the cacao nibs or whatever, it does have more bitterness. So just be aware. Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, it was like revealing. It was like the big reveal for me. I was like, yep, I've been kidding myself. So Michelle Ricker, I so appreciate you being on. This has been super fun to talk about sugar. Plus, I could talk about sugar all day long. I don't know. We could talk about wine. We could talk about sugar, dating. There's just certain topics that are very fascinating to me. But, Michelle, she's going to be on again in the future. We're going to talk about the brain, and we are going to talk about, how to keep our emotions stable. We're going to deep dive more into that, and we're going to talk about that whole inflammation game. And so you didn't hear it all. You got to come back. So thank you, Michelle Ricker. Thank you to all of our NASM and APA friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you didn't catch us live, you can, tune people into Spotify, to Apple Podcasts. Get on, talk to us, rate it, do what you need to do. But I do hope you come back. We'll see you next time.